Hey, Megan, how are you today? Thank you so much for dropping by. It's like you're in my living room. Really appreciate chatting with you. How are you?
I know, I love it. Technology's done wonderful things, and it's allowed us to connect across the air and miles away. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so the world doesn't know how amazing you are. So would you take a minute and just introduce yourself? And I had the pleasure of listening to you speak, and it was really life changing. So, Megan, will you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, my name is Megan Andrews. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and by education. My experience includes over 30 years of experience as a clinician in the community, as well as an educator, as I work as a faculty member an adjunct faculty member at the University School of Social Work, where I was introduced to the concept of trauma-informed work and trauma-informed counseling, and really in the employee assistance business have brought that to companies, bringing that concept, those guide rails, that help support decision making. It's trauma-informed.
And Megan, I'm so anxious to get started. I'm famous for that interruption, but and I hate asking this question, but you have all this wealth of experience, and then you have the Buffalo shooting. So can you describe for us listening where you were, how that affected you, and kind of that idea of theory and reality mushing together?
Yeah, I mean, it was surreal, honestly. It's been just about a year, a little over a year and a half. And we were kind of faced with the unthinkable. A shooter drove to our community intentionally to target a part of our community that is alive and vibrant. The grocery store serves people of color. And I was responding as a person who supports the community and lots of organizations that were on site that day, including the police department, fire department, our transportation department, and the like, including human service agencies that serve that community. And we were on site providing immediate support, crisis support for anybody in need at that moment, as well as the ongoing months after. And really, that's what kind of brought to light the need for us to understand that not everybody was impacted by that experience in our community in the same way. People with different backgrounds and different experiences, people with different colors of skin were impacted differently based on the fact that they were targeted, and it had a different traumatic effect because of that.
And so, Megan, it's now we're a few months, years later, and the news just comes fast and furious. So I'm going to ask you a really hard one, okay? My morning started with a client. I'm sure you're familiar with this client who says, there's nothing that can help me feel positive again. I don't tell me to go out and take a breath. Don't tell me to eat healthy, to sleep better. I've done all that. I tried all that, and I'm turning on the news and I see horrific things. I can't get access to the therapist to help me change, but yet I got to pick up my kids. I got to take care of my older mother. So I'm dumping it all in one question for you to know. How do we get to a hopeful, optimistic place? Can you give me some ideas?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is so important, Wendy, in that we can't self-care our way out of systemic challenges. We can't train our way out of systemic challenges. And we have to look at it from multiple points of view. And I do think that having that conversation with folks lets them know that it's not all on their shoulders. It's not all on them. That's much of this is the system around them. Much of this is what that we need to stop beating people over the head and telling them to take a walk and take a bubble bath and they'll all feel better. We can't keep doing that.
It's interesting because, Megan, I use this as an example. Like when I met you and the times I've talked to you, I just feel better. Like, so describe to me why just having a conversation, just talking, like, why does that make me feel better? I don't really understand. Why do I feel better after I talk to Megan?
It's such a great question because I think that's the idea that somehow therapy, conversations, counseling is somehow magical. It isn't magic in the sense that it's going to make things all better, and that there isn't effort involved. And it's really about being willing to take a look at things from a different perspective. It's being willing to acknowledge and validate that my experience and the reason I'm feeling this way makes sense. That maybe it's the stuff that's coming at me that doesn't make sense. And I may not have full control over that, but I do have control over my response, my reactions, where I go, where I don't go, who I talk to, who I don't talk to, and recognizing that our nervous systems are a big part of this. Where do we find that our nervous systems are more neutral or more calm? Why is that? Digging in and finding out, like, why when I talk to that person, I feel a sense of calm. Am I shifting my perspective? Am I seeing things bigger than myself? I often ask people, in session to kind of close their eyes and take that elevated view, kind of put yourself up on a satellite, put yourself up there and looking down at the people in your circle and then beyond in your community and then beyond in your city, your state, your country, and then the world. We need to have that perspective shift. And who does that for us? Who helps us find that? And not just who, but what? What helps us find that?
It's so interesting because what you're describing. It sounds hard in some ways, but if we make it simple, right? If we break it down and really just make it simple, it's asking someone how they are and allowing them to answer real is life changing.
Yeah, and not keep walking. Hi, how are you? And keep walking. I've done it myself. I catch myself. But really just sitting in, looking at people in the eye. And I think this is one of the things that concerns me is that we are turning counseling and therapy into a transactional experience. And it is not. It is relational. How we relate to one another. And we know how this has affected us post-pandemic. We know that disconnect and that this is great, but a lot of it is transactional, but we have to make it interactional. We have to make it relational. And that requires us to sit down and be in each other's energy, be in each other's eyesight, look at each other in the eye and say, and the reality is our nervous systems look to one another for calming.
Soothing, right? That's self-soothing. It's so interesting, Megan, because my son will probably just throw something at me if you're telling this, but he's got this blanket from when he was like super young, like 5 or 6 years old. I mean, you can imagine he's 31 now, right? My youngest. And this blanket brings him this sense of soothing. And I think to myself, so what do we have? And it's interesting because some of the things like, I've been cleaning lately and I've been donating a ton. And I mean, can you describe like, why does that make me feel like I'm like, yes, there's this sense of like, I ran a marathon. I mean, didn't run a marathon, but I did clean out my closet and donate a ton of things. How come that makes me feel so awesome?
Because it frees you up.
So true.
It reduces the burden that you're carrying. We put things in our sphere. We put people in our sphere and we put stuff in our sphere thinking it's going to help, thinking it's going to provide us some support and some guidance. I'm struck by even just thinking about Chandler Bing, Matthew Perry. He said it. I mean, I watched his interviews. I've read his book. I even listened to it because it was so incredibly powerful to hear his voice. But the reality is what we have and that stuff in our sphere isn't going to provide us that support and guidance and just that calm that people are going to bring to us. And that's why we think we need this. But now when we unburden ourselves and say, okay, I actually don't need all this stuff. I need things to be reasonable and organized so I can feel like I can accomplish what I need to in the day. That space between what I need to accomplish and my perceived idea that I can achieve that is that gap is small. And the smaller that gap is, the less stressed we are, the less our nervous system's on fire. When that gap is big and when there's something to do today and I feel like I don't have the capacity to do it, that's where the anxiety sits. I got to do it.
I love it. And Megan, you just named the podcast. So you jumped on today. I want to thank you. I know what I'm going to name this. It's Unburdened. That's what we need to do. And I think one of the last things that we really want to touch upon, and again, my gratitude for you being here is maybe I'm doing okay, right? I've heard it, but my loved one at home or my boss or my colleague, they're in that really deep place where they're feeling that overwhelmed. What can I do to help them and support them? Because I'm actually okay, but they might be bringing me down a little bit.
The first tip is connect with them for real.
Yeah.
And you know what for real means. You know what for real means. Sometimes it's a text message. Sometimes it's pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to be connecting with people. It may be stopping by. It may be making some banana bread and sending it over to your neighbor. Connect with people.
You know what, Megan, I got to interrupt here and tell you something really interesting. Yeah. When my ex-husband passed away, we were recently divorced, right? I was running the company, 1,000 trainers. How many do you think sent me a condolence note? How many do you think reached out, like you said, for real? What do you think?
I would hope. What do I hope? I would hope half.
2.
Wow.
And the answer I got from them was that old philosophy of, I didn't want to upset you more. So I was afraid. I didn't want to ask how you're doing because, whoa, you were in Buffalo when it happened. So let me not upset you more, Megan.
Right.
So talk to me about
it's a great point because I think that's what we are. We think, oh, someone else has it. I don't want to bother them. I don't want to take their time. I don't want to, what you just said, upset them more. When in reality, connection, relationship, and being real with people is vital to our sustainability as a population. That we cannot take that we can't take the humanity out of what we're doing at all. I'm not afraid of AI.
I'm right there with you, right? It's exciting. It's interesting. It's one of the tips I have taking care of my mother is I always have a trip planned for her. It's always on the calendar. We've got January 5th. We're going. Now, will we go?
Right.
Do I think we'll go? But man, it's there.
Yeah.
And we talk about it and we may shop for it and we plan for it because that's the connection I know my mom loves.
Yeah.
And am I scared that she's 88? Yeah. Stuff could happen.
But the research says that planning a vacation is more calming.
Yep.
Than going on one.
So true.
And I would agree with that. I love planning a vacation.
So I can't thank you enough for jumping on today, beginning this conversation of how do we unburden ourselves and our loved ones. It's not just that you have such an amazing wealth of educational background, but you've lived it and you're always willing to share. So thank you so much for being part of our program today.
Always happy to talk with you, Wendy, anytime. You take care of yourself. For real.
For real.
For real.